In this video, we'll consider the question, what is ethics? First, we're going to start with a clip of the famous trolley problem. I'm not going to play the clip here in this video, but you can find the clip both in the original PowerPoint and D2L under course content, and I've also added the clip as a separate video you can watch. And here is another video presenting the trolley problem more graphically so that it's easier to understand what's going on. And last, here's another video clip of the second variation of the trolley problem with the big guy. So the trolley problem comes to us from the philosopher Philip Foot, and the second variation with the big guy comes to us from Judith Jarvis Thomson, who wrote a very famous article on abortion we'll be considering later in the semester. So I want you to take a few seconds to consider what you would do in each of those scenarios. You could have answered that you would have handled both cases the same, but frequently people switch from the first case to the second, so that they, in the first case, decide to save the 5 people by diverting the train to kill the 1 person, and in the second case, they will not push the big guy over to save the 5 people. So if you're one of those individuals who switched from one case to the next, that's something that is really interesting. It's an interesting choice because at least superficially, they seem like similar cases. So the question would be, why did you switch? What kind of justification can you give for your decision to treat the 2 cases differently? What is different about them that causes the different treatment? And here's one final case, also from Judith Jarvis Thomson. In this case, the trolley's headed towards a loop. The way it's going to go onto the loop, it's going to hit the 5 people. But also on the loop is the big guy. Now, since it's a loop, it's going to hit the 5 people first, and if it were able to continue, it would hit the big guy. But if you divert it so that it's going around the loop the opposite way, then it will hit the big guy first. And the way the problem goes, if it hits the big guy, it's then going to stop and it won't kill the 5 people. So how is this case different or the same from the previous 2 cases? It seems to combine elements of the other 2. Because unlike in the first case where you're just diverting the train away from the 5 people, it has to kill the big guy to work. In the original scenario, the person on the other track was going to die, but they didn't have to die. It wasn't necessary for them to die. It wasn't their death which saved the 5 other people. Their death was a kind of an accident or an unfortunate consequence. So in this scenario, though, the big guy does have to die for the other 5 people to live. On the other hand, you're not actually touching or pushing somebody. So in that way, it's more like the first case and less like the second case. If you would have treated the 2 original cases differently, it's interesting to think about how this case plays in. Would you treat it like the first case or the second case? Now, oftentimes people think these kinds of thought experiments, for that's what they are, they're thought experiments, are very far-fetched and impractical. But actually, this example is not that impractical because they're having to consider similar issues right now in the development of driverless cars. A driverless car is going to have to know what to do when it encounters a quandary in which people might be injured if it does A, but they might also be injured if it avoids A. So the engineers who are programming these cars are going to have to weigh out some of the very same ethical issues that we're discussing here. For instance, consider if a driverless car that you're in is about to hit a tractor trailer, which would kill you, but if the car avoids a tractor trailer, it's going to have to go up on the sidewalk and kill someone else, or maybe even a group of people. What should the car be programmed to do? Should it be programmed to protect you since it's your car? Would it matter if it weren't your car, if you were in a taxi or if you were in a government vehicle? Should government vehicles be programmed to protect the public rather than the person inside the car? What other factors must be considered in deciding how to program the car? So we can play with the scenario in all kinds of ways, as indeed folks who work in this area are currently doing, like Patrick Lynn, an ethicist who works on technology issues. He's speculating here, what if we gave a car something called an ethics setting, and people get to decide how to set the setting. What should be allowed for people to make a decision about? Should they be able to make a decision to have their car discriminate based on factors that they value, like maybe against cars that are gas guzzlers if they're an environmentalist? Should they be allowed to always say that their lives are the most important and other lives should not be taken as seriously? These are considerations that really have to be thought about. A few more possibilities for how to set that ethics setting in the driverless car. So psychologists study things like the trolley problem. And when they study the trolley problem, they've come up with some interesting results, which I have up here on the screen for you to look at. It turns out that men are more likely than women to say that it's okay to push the big guy. People are more likely to say that the pushing the big guy is okay, depending on other factors in their lives, like whether or not they've just been watching a comedy clip. So that raises the question, are we doing psychology? So the point of this lecture right now is to address the issue of what is ethics. What is ethics as opposed to other things? For instance, what makes it different from psychology? So take a moment to think about what those differences might be. What might be the difference between how a psychologist would look at something like the trolley problem and a philosopher would? So one way to think about it is that psychologists are interested in studying what we do, and studying our behavior, and studying how we act. So they might look at the trolley problem to see how people might act in those situations. So if that's true, what are philosophers interested in? But I think we can go further than that. Psychologists aren't only interested in what people do and how they behave. They're also interested in their beliefs, including their beliefs about how they should behave. So they also study what people think about their ethical beliefs, what people think they should do in a case like the trolley problem. But that's still not what philosophers are interested in, because they aren't interested in what people believe they should do. They're interested in something slightly different. And so here we get to it. Philosophers aren't interested in what people believe they should do. They're interested in what they should actually do. And there's a slight but important difference there. People may believe they should do something, and maybe it's what they should do. But the philosopher's not interested in the mere beliefs. The philosopher's interested in trying to find justifications for the beliefs. In other words, finding out whether those beliefs are correct or incorrect, mistaken and misguided, or rationally justified. And the word rationality itself has to do with the idea of giving reasons for beliefs. Finding out that our beliefs are rational means that we can explain why we should hold them. Not psychologically why we do hold them, but why they are the right sorts of beliefs that we should have. So that is what ethics is interested in. It's interested in coming up with justifications for our moral beliefs. But before we consider what forms those justifications might take, or in other words, what makes an action right or wrong, which we're going to do in just a little bit, we need to consider two potential objections to our project. And they're on the next two videos. So take a minute to think about what they might be and then head over to the next video. But first, take a few minutes to watch another clip of The Good Place, which should be under course content, which shows the trolley problem really in action. And beware, there is a lot of fake blood.